Hello, friends. I've been playing around with Capture One for a couple of weeks, and the verdict is in. It kicks butt compared to Lightroom as far as Fuji files go. Let me show you. Now, I took this picture in Israel, these doors, this little guy in the shop here. So if I zoom in here to look at Lightroom, here is on the left, and Capture One is on the right. If we zoom into the shed over here, you know, Capture One has a little bit more detail. If you look at this little can over here, there seems to be, you know, some kind of crumbly noise, and that's not present here in the Capture One. Now, a lot of people who defend Lightroom, you know, the Lightroom people, and I'm a Lightroom user, by the way, you guys know that, they say that Capture One has some mumbo jumbo where they increase contrast and they, you know, have their own noise reduction kind of working in the background so that your RAW looks better coming in, and that Lightroom is a better, you know, representation of what the RAW should be. That's all fine and good. I'm cool with that. You know, I'll buy that. The only thing is, let's go to these green doors, is I care about, you know what? I want detail in my RAW photos. And if I don't have the detail, I want to be able to sharpen and have the image be high quality when I export it. So I'll take your argument that this is a RAW that needs some work. But here's the thing, you know, like, all right, the door looks better already in Capture One. Let's make it better in Lightroom so it matches the default RAW here. So the thing is, if you sharpen in Lightroom, we know what happens. It becomes a painting, which is nice. You've got the Rembrandt going there. You see the worms coming in? So I'm going to hold down the Option key to sort of mask everything out. We just want the edges to be affected. Okay, that's fair, that's fair. But it's still a crumbly mess, and it has to do with just Lightroom is not advancing. This is the newest Lightroom that was just announced, Lightroom 8. I got to tell you, I'm really frustrated, especially with my Fuji files, how they're just crumbled. It's complete garbage. Unacceptable, people. So let's bring the sharpening down so it's not crazy. Play with the radius a little bit. And no matter what I do, I've tried all different combos of sharpening in Lightroom, you still get Rembrandt. And just look at what Capture One does. If you grab and just pull the sharpening over, it just gives you proper sharpening, like Photoshop sharpening. You know, when I want to sharpen my Adobe files, I have to bring them into Photoshop to actually sharpen them. And for some reason, Adobe doesn't want to put those tools, those powerful sharpening tools, right here into Lightroom. So already I'm sold on Capture One for just a little notch here of this sharpening tool gives me the detail I want in my file. Okay, here's another example. Rocks. You guys know this. We actually printed this file in one video, but here are some rocks. And let me try to match exposure here because I raised the exposure on the Lightroom one. And again, no sharpening on this one. If I try to sharpen and I want a little bit more of the lines going there, as far as my Fuji files go, nightmare. It becomes, again, a painting. Let's mask so we can get the edges of the lines. Okay, we can mask, whatever. I've tried different things, like I told you, and you can hear the frustration in my voice. Again, simple sharpening tool. And Capture One understands what lines are, what sharpening is. And again, we're pixel peeping here. But I want the best possible file so that when I print it or show it, you know, on a Retina screen, it really pops. Like it's high definition delicious. Okay, another example. This was the stray dog shot using the 23mm f2 lens for Fuji. And coming in, again, people claim that Capture One has better colors, better vibrance, better contrast. And again, I'm totally cool with that if they're faking it. You know, let me reset this dog here. So let's say we want more detail out of our Fuji file here. Well, we'll start with this one. Again, if we increase our sharpening, we get worms. We get Rembrandt going there. I'm sorry, Monet this time, Monet. So I'm going to bring the sharpening down, of course, mask, so we just get the edges. I'm really concerned with this little light, you know, the little specular in the eye being sharp. But again, I don't want the wormage. Keep the detail down because detail up seems to, you know, increase the wormage. And the best I could do without going nuts and starting to see this all junk fade away is that. And again, just one swipe of, Capture One's sharpening looks great. And you can also play with the threshold, which either increases or decreases the amount of sharpening that's being put into the file. But again, now this is kind of where we look at the picture and hold on, come back, doggy. Come back, doggy. That's another thing that's annoying with Lightroom is the zooming tools are so all over the place. But look at the eye. Look at the specular in the eye. It's just like crystal nice and beautiful, moist. And here, to see it nice in Lightroom, you got to be like, hey, dog's eye looks great. Okay, so here's on the left, this is actually not a RAW file. This is actually Lightroom looking at the Fuji JPEG. And Fuji has their own awesome sharpening that goes on in camera. But I suspect that Lightroom is ruining that sharpening. But it still looks good. I mean, it looks good in Lightroom. But here's the RAW file. This is the RAW file that's in the Capture One. And even if I pull up the sharpening tools are so advanced in Capture One that it actually does a much better job than the JPEG coming into Lightroom. Now let's show you the RAW file. Whoa, sorry. Didn't mean that. Here is the RAW file. Let's reset it because I was playing with it before. Let's get the exposure up a little bit. And of course, to make it great, let's bring the vibrance up. Let's pretend that it came into Lightroom that way. But again, look at the eye. Like, I can't get it all glazy and delicious. Even sharpening, as soon as you start sharpening, that looks pretty good. Come back here, chicken. But, look at all the artifacts that happen when you sharpen. And if I zoom in here, there's like no artifacts on the Capture One files. And that's what bugs me the most is just this sort of Lightroom not being able to read Fuji files well enough. And even if you mask off the sharpening, I don't want to bring this into Photoshop to sharpen. I want to sharpen right in my editing program. So let's say you don't want to spend the $300 on Capture One. Well, there's a cheaper program called Luminar. Luminar is a great option if you want to edit, single photos and have really professional advanced filters and all kinds of post-processing tools. So here is, sharpening in the Luminar. Okay, and this is the RAW file. This is the Luminar RAW file, and Luminar can handle the Fuji files 10 times better than Adobe Lightroom, which is the professional standard. So here's Luminar reading the RAW file straight from the camera, but if we just increase the sharpening, there are no artifacts, there's no crazy worms, and it does a really nice job. So take a look at Luminar as well as an option for your Fuji files. All right, well, what about Canon files? Well, there's a little difference, not enough to go nuts over, like the Fuji problem. So the way the Capture One and Lightroom are rendering skin is a little different, but again, remember all this is crazy variable because you can go into Lightroom and you can change how you want the RAW to be read. Do you want Adobe Color? Do you want Adobe Portrait coming in? Do you want what the camera matching is? So you can kind of say, hey, we want camera standard. So here it looks like Capture One is kind of doing a 5D Mark IV JPEG here, and this is Lightroom's version of that. But as far as sharpness goes, which is what this video is about, the difference is not that crazy. It totally is still there because of Lightroom's, let me reset this so you can see, Lightroom's poor sharpening tools. So if I do sharpen here and go up, I'm not going to get worms like I do on the Fuji files. And so it handles the Canon files a lot better. Still, Capture One, I feel like, maybe for portraits, Capture Ones may over sharpen because if I start to sharpen here, I definitely want to have a layer mask of some kind and just sharpen the eyes because once you start dealing with teens and blemishes and things like that, it's not great. But the sharpness in Capture One, if we just look at the eyes here and the catch light, is a lot better. The sharpening tools are better in Capture One. You can see the eyes pop a little bit more. Overall, you're not going to notice, I don't think, with Canon, but with Fuji, obviously, very much so. Here's the finished portrait, by the way, so we can show you a skin retouch, so in case the kid is seeing this. I'm not going to give up my Lightroom right away for my Canon work and my pro work and for my event work because of the workflow and how the images are all, cataloged and laid out and published services and all the stuff we've talked about in the past. However, I am going to switch all my Fuji stuff over to Capture One, and I'm going to get better at working on these images, all these Fuji images that I have been working on in Lightroom. I'm going to redo a lot of them and see, what I've been missing out on and how much detail there actually is in a lot of these photographs. And I'm excited for that, and it'll just keep like Capture One on the side for me, learning how to use it. And as I get better with it, I'll probably do some tutorials for you guys if you want to see that. But I'm excited to see what the files actually hold. Yeah. All right, guys. See ya.